It was no more than a league to where the outwalls had stood. They soon reached them, too soon for Merry. Wild cries broke out, and there was some clash of arms, but it was brief. The orcs busy about the walls were few and amazed, and they were quickly slain or driven off. Before the ruin of the north gate in the Ramas, the king halted again. The first J.R.R. drew up behind him and about him and on either side. Dernhelm kept close to the king, though Elfhelm's company was away on the right. Grimbold's men turned aside and passed round a great gap in the wall further eastward. Merry peered from behind Dernhelm's back. Far away, maybe 10 miles or more, there was a great burning, but between it and the riders lines of fire blazed in a vast crescent, at the nearest point less than a league distant. He could make out little more than a dark plain, and as yet he neither saw any hope of morning nor felt any wind, changed or unchanged. Now silently the host of Rohan moved forward into the field of Gondor, pouring in slowly but steadily, like a rising tide through breaches in a dike that men have thought secure. But the mind and will of the black captain was bent wholly on the falling city, and as yet no tidings came to him warning him that his designs held any flaw. After a while the king led his men away somewhat eastward, to come between the fires of the siege and the outer fields. Still they were unchallenged, and still Theoden gave no signal. At last he halted once again. The city was now nearer. A smell of burning was in the air, and a very shadow of death. The horses were uneasy. But the king sat upon Snowmane, motionless, gazing upon the agony of Minas Tirith, as if stricken suddenly by anguish or by dread. He seemed to shrink down, cowed by age. Merry himself felt as if a great weight of horror and doubt had settled on him. His heart beat slowly. Time seemed poised in uncertainty. They were too late. Too late was worse than never. Perhaps Theoden would quail, bow his old head, turn, slink away to hide in the hills. Then suddenly Merry felt it, beyond doubt, a change. Wind was in his face, light was glimmering. Far, far away in the south, the clouds could be dimly seen as remote gray shapes, rolling up, drifting. Morning lay beyond them. But at that same moment there was a flash, as if lightning had sprung from the earth beneath the city. For a searing second it stood dazzling, far off in black and white, its topmost tower like a glittering needle. And then in the darkness closed again there came a rolling over the fields, a great boom. At that sound the bent shape of the king suddenly sprang erect. Tall and proud he seemed again, and rising in his stirrups, he cried in a loud voice, more clear than any that had ever heard a mortal man achieve before, "Arise, arise, riders of Theoden! Fell deeds awake, fire and slaughter! Spear shall be shaken, shield be splintered, a sword day, a red day, ere the sun rises! Ride now, ride now, ride to Gondor!" With that he seized a great horn from Guthlaf his banner-bearer, and he blew such a blast upon it that it burst asunder. And straightway all the horns in the host were lifted up in music, and the blowing of the horns of Rohan in that hour was like a storm upon the plain, and a thunder in the mountains. Ride now, ride now, ride to Gondor! Suddenly the king cried to Snowmane, and the horse sprang away. Behind him his banner blew in the wind, white horse upon a green field, but he outpaced it. After him thundered the knights of his house, but he was ever before them. Eomer rode there, the white horsetail in his helm floating in his speed, and the front of the first J.R.R. roared like a breaker, foaming to the shore, but Theoden was not to be overtaken. Fey he seemed, or the battle fury of his fathers ran like new fire in his veins, and he was borne up on Snowmane like a god of old, even as Orome the Great in the battle of the Valar when the world was young. His golden shield was uncovered, and lo, it shone like an image of the sun, and the grass flamed into green beneath the white feet of his steed. For morning came, morning, and a wind from the sea. The darkness was removed, and the host of Mordor wailed, and terror took them, and they fled, and died, and the hoofs of wrath rode over them. And then as the host of Rohan burst into song, and they sang as they slew, for the joy of battle was on them, and the sound of their singing was fair and terrible, came even to the city.
But of bliss and glad life there is little to be said before it ends, as works fair and wonderful, while they still endure for eyes to see, are their own record, and only when they are in peril or broken forever do they pass into song.
Hello, I'm Cale Harris, and I'm going to be reading my favorite passage from The Lord of the Rings. This is from the Fellowship of the Ring. When Frodo and Gandalf are in Moria, they're talking about how they're worried about how Sauron's figuring out about the ring and stuff. And Gandalf basically foreshadows the way the ring is going to be destroyed and kind of summarizes the entire theme / point of the whole trilogy. Gandalf says he, Sauron, may be seeking for it now, if he has not already found out where it lies. Indeed, Frodo, I fear that he may even think that the long unnoticed name of Baggins has become important. But this is terrible, cried Frodo, far worse than the worst that I imagined from your hints and warnings. Oh, Gandalf, best of friends, what am I to do? For now I am really afraid. What am I to do? What a pity that Bilbo did not stab that vile creature when he had a chance. Talking about Gollum. Pity, Gandalf says, it was pity that stayed his hand. Pity and mercy, not to strike without need. And he has been well rewarded, Frodo. Be sure that he took so little hurt from the evil and escaped in the end, because he began his ownership of the ring so, with pity. I am sorry, said Frodo, but I am frightened, and I do not feel any pity for Gollum. You have not seen him, Gandalf broke in. No, and I don't want to, said Frodo. I can't understand you. Do you mean to say that you and the elves have let him live on after all those horrible deeds? Now, at any rate, he is as bad as an orc and just an enemy. He deserves death. Deserves it, says Gandalf. I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death and judgment. For even the very wise cannot see all ends. I have not much hope that Gollum can be cured before he dies, but there is a chance of it, and he is bound up with the fate of the ring. My heart tells me that he has some part to play yet, for good or ill, before the end. And when that comes, the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many, yours not least.
They had come to the desolation that lay before Mordor, the lasting monument of dark labor of its slaves that should endure all purposes after their purposes were made void, a land defiled, deceased, beyond all healing, unless a great sea should wash it with oblivion. I feel sick, said Sam. Frodo said nothing.